Hello, and welcome back to Learning in Lockdown, your cake decorating online course presented to you by your local library. As you know, my name is Michelle, and I'm your instructor for this beginner level course. Since this is our third week of class, we've already covered many topics, including preparing cakes and icing, working with decorating bags and using decorating tips, and also creating basic designs. And so today we will cover two skills. First, we will cover icing a cupcake using a decorating bag, and we will also learn to create the star flower design. So we'll start with our first skill, which will be icing a cupcake. So to complete this skill, you will need a batch of cupcakes, a cupcake nail, which you will use to hold your cupcake while you are working on it, a decorating bag with tip 1M and no coupler, and medium consistency buttercream icing. Now, you can add color to your icing, but for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to be using white icing to ice the cupcakes. And also note that for this technique, we are going to be holding our decorating bag at a 90-degree angle. And that goes if you are right-handed or left-handed. All right, so to ice your cupcakes, you will begin by placing one of your cupcakes on a cupcake nail, like so. And you will take your icing bag in your other hand. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to pick up your cupcake and your icing bag, so I like to lean my cupcake nail against something, usually my container of cupcakes. And I'm gonna get my icing bag ready in my other hand, making sure that I've got my icing worked all the way down and that it's nice and twisted and closed at the top. So I will grab my cupcake and then holding my bag at a 90-degree angle, I am going to hold it so that the tip is slightly above the surface of the cupcake, starting at the outer edge. And like I said, beginning at the outer edge of the cupcake, I'm going to turn my cupcake nail as I pipe a spiral of icing around the surface of the cupcake, working towards the center. And once my spiral has completely covered the center of my cupcake, I am going to stop my pressure and pull the tip away. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that now. So just making sure my bag is ready to go, firmly closed. I've got a nice firm pressure. Take my cupcake. Okay, and here we go. Just do your best to try to maintain steady pressure. But it's not a huge deal if your spiral of icing breaks. We're not aiming for perfection, we're just doing the best we can. And you'll of course get better with practice. And I'm continuing working my way towards the center, continuing to turn my cupcake nail. I'm getting closer to the center. And once I'm satisfied, I'll stop pressure and pull the tip away. Et voila, you have a nicely iced cupcake. Before moving on to the next skill, here are a few tips and tricks for icing your cupcakes. First of all, it is not absolutely necessary to use the cupcake nail. While the nail does make it easier to turn the cupcake as you are icing it, many people find the cupcake nail cumbersome and difficult to work with. And even as I mentioned during my demonstration, it can be difficult to pick up your cupcake on a nail and also your icing bag at the same time. So feel free to discard your cupcake nail and simply turn your cupcake with your hand if you find this easier. And next, it is always a good idea to take your icing out of the fridge a few minutes early before you start working with it. And by this, I mean about 3 or 5 minutes early. This is so that it can soften before you begin to work with it. And this goes for when you're icing your cupcakes, but generally it's always a good idea to take your icing out a few minutes early, especially if you're working with medium or thick consistency icing. And the reason for this is that if your icing is still cold from being in the fridge, it will be more difficult to work with. It'll be difficult to squeeze smoothly out of the bag using the correct technique, and usually your designs won't come out as pretty. On the other hand, if you have been working with your icing for an extended period of time and it's starting to become warm and mushy, it might be a good idea to pop it back in the fridge for a few minutes. And you may find that whenever you're working on a project for an extended period of time, you're constantly needing to put your icing bags back in the fridge and then take them out, letting them soften and then harden again. This is completely fine and necessary to maintain the consistency of your icing. And with practice, you'll get better at managing this. And then finally, if while you are icing your cupcakes, your line of icing breaks, this is not a problem. You don't have to start over. All you have to do is just wipe your tip on a paper towel to shave off the excess icing, and then just keep going icing your cupcake where you left off. You may find that your line of icing is more likely to break if your icing is actually too cold. So if you have had this problem, you're icing your cupcakes and your line of icing breaks, that might be a sign that your icing needs to soften up a little bit. Now that we've iced our cupcakes, let's move on to our second lesson skill, which is creating the star flower design. So to create the star flower, you will need your practice board, a batch of cupcakes, your decorating bag with tip 2D and no coupler, which you will use for the flowers, and a decorating bag with coupler and tip 3, which you will use for the flower centers. And both of these bags will be filled with medium consistency buttercream icing. And for this demonstration, I will be using two colors, pink for the flowers and green for the centers. However, feel free to use any colors you'd like. And then note for this technique as well, we will also be holding our bag at a 90-degree angle. Now for the star flower, remember that you can use your practice board and do a couple practice tries before you do the design on your actual cupcakes, which I've done already. So once you're ready, you will take one of your cupcakes and you will take your icing bag filled with medium consistency icing, and you are using tip 2D, and you can use any color. I'm using pink for this demonstration. And you're going to get your bag ready, making sure that your icing is squeezed all the way down to the bottom. You've got the top twisted closed. So you will hold your cupcake and your bag at a 90-degree angle once again, and you want to make sure that your tip is just touching the surface of your cupcake. And then you will squeeze with steady pressure, letting the icing build up to make the flower. And once you're satisfied, you will stop squeezing and lift the tip away. So I'll demonstrate that now. And there we go. Now that you have made a star flower on your cupcake, you may want to add a flower center. So to do this, you will take your decorating bag using tip 3 and a coupler this time, filled with medium consistency icing of any color of your choice. And let me just get my bag ready. Once again, you are going to be holding your bag at a 90-degree angle with the tip almost touching the center of the flower. And you will squeeze out a dot of icing, keeping the end of the tip buried in the icing as you're squeezing. Once you're satisfied, you will stop squeezing, pull the tip up and off to the side. This way you are shaving off the point on the dot. So I'll go ahead and demonstrate that now. Let me just get my bag ready once again. Okay, and here we go. Stop squeezing and pull to the side. And there we are. I have made a star flower with a green center. So before closing this lesson, here are a few tips and tricks for the star flower design. So when creating the flower, I want to re-emphasize that it is very important to start with the tip slightly touching the surface of the cupcake. The reason for this is that if you start squeezing out the flower before touching your tip to the surface, you may find that your flower does not stay on your cupcake, meaning it will remain stuck on your tip as you pull away. So make sure that you start with your tip slightly touching the surface. Also, it is important that you stop squeezing the bag before you lift the tip away. And again, this is because if you maintain pressure on your bag as you pull away, your flower may also stay stuck to your tip. So that is another suggestion to avoid that problem. For the flower center, if you want your dot of icing to fill the center of your flower, it is important that you maintain pressure on your bag and let the icing build up before you pull the tip away. So letting the icing build up and also keeping the tip buried in the icing helps create a dot that fills the center and makes for a more complete looking flower. And so also, even though the flower center only requires a small amount of icing, it's a good idea to fill the bag with more icing than you think you'll need. And this is because it is kind of tricky to work with a bag that only has a small amount of icing in it. I actually forgot about this for my demonstration, and I only put a small amount of green icing in my bag, and that made it kind of tricky to get a good grip on it. So even if you have extra icing left over, don't worry about that. You can always use it to create another design, or you can save it for another project. And actually with the buttercream icing, all the sugar that is in there means that it keeps quite well in the fridge. Now that we've seen how to ice our cupcakes and create the star flower design, let's move on to the homework assignment for this lesson. And so I'll ask you to take time to practice both of these techniques at home, and don't get frustrated if you don't get it right the first time. And then once you've practiced, I will ask you to record yourself completing both of the skills, and then submit your video clips and pictures to the class Google Drive folder. You can follow the link shown on the screen here to see more information about the homework assignment. And then please don't forget as well to fill out the instructor feedback survey, and the link is also shown on the screen here. And so as a heads up, next lesson, we are going to be covering swirled flowers, which are very similar to the star flowers, and also rosettes. And then during the following weeks, we will be looking at more flowers and also border techniques. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing everyone's work. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.